Accepted. Thanks, Tim. Today I'd like a very open discussion, so if anybody's got any queries, comments, abuse or otherwise, happy to see it. So I think probably Tim's gone over pretty much everything about my background here that I wanted to mention in this first slide. Perhaps I didn't mention in that 1804, which some of you may have heard of. It's a hub based at Cairo, mainly focused in the IT spaces to clean areas, and been involved a little bit in the establishment of that, and although not on the committee of that one at the moment. Has anybody been to the HunterNet BVG Business Value Group sessions in this group? I've been involved with that since inception, and that's really just a forum to talk about areas of business that might be relevant to members, and we try to make that a pretty much of an open forum. And if anybody's got an opportunity to go to those, I'd recommend you go along to them, because I think all sorts of interesting issues are often talked about. It might be how to grow your business, or how to do better sales, or all sorts of things that pop up of issues there. So just moving on. Sorry, I'll just see it. Now, does everybody know what an angel investor is? I mean, it's not a very common terminology for a lot of people. So angel investing really is all about the process of investing in early stage and startup type enterprises, typically innovative enterprises. And it may or may not be relevant to what you do or what you might do in the future, but I think a lot of the principles that we tend to look at might have application for what you're doing, generally when you engage in a business. And particularly the issues we look at in terms of what we look at when we look at investing in things, and the considerations might be useful for you to know. So why angel investors? Why bother with angel investors? Now, Hunter Angels, as an example, is a group. There's currently 12 of us. We're expanding the group up to have probably up to about 25 people, maybe even more people that just get together and look at opportunities and think, do we want to invest in it or not? And so you might say, well, why bother with angel investors? You might say, well, I'll go along and go straight to venture capital people, or go to the bank, or whatever it might be, to be able to get finance. So the first thing is that angel investors tend to be risk capital providers. So we understand the process about the risks associated with startups and early stage providers. We're comfortable with a small equity share. We see that the founders of the business are the ones that have to drive the business. And so we want the founders to stay in control of the business. So we often have maybe 10, 20% equity share in the business. We do have a good knowledge of the startup challenges and risks associated with it. So that's good, because we can help the process a little bit, and we understand that if things go wrong, then that's really often part of the process. It's how you handle things when things go wrong that really matter. And often we've got a bunch of people with varying skills, and they typically, the angel investors tend to be relatively high net worth individuals that have managed to accumulate some wealth through their knowledge in business or in the professions, and so they bring those skills with them and apply them to the investments we do. We often have good contacts and things. I shouldn't say credibility, because that sounds a bit self-serving, but a lot of the Hunter Angels is well known to a lot around town, and a lot of people have, I believe, a lot of comfort in dealing with Hunter Angels. I should say, by the way, there is another angel investor group in town called Wright's House. So it's not just Hunter Angels, and there are angel investor groups around Australia as well. So Sydney's got a very active Sydney Angels, you name it, most of the big centres in Australia have an angel investor group. We're comfortable with co-investing, so that often some of our investments we might invest with Sydney Angels or some other angel group. And that's good for those seeking capital, because if we can't supply enough, often we'll introduce the founders to another angel investing group and to combine for greater capital. The pitch and due diligence process that we ask people to go through can often be very beneficial to the angel investing groups, to the founders, so that we require them to effectively do a pitch to us and get their act right. They've got to be investor ready effectively to present to us, and so that process in itself can be beneficial. So what do we look for typically when we're assessing an opportunity? You have to be investor ready. You have to get your act into gear and have your business in a manner that is ready for investment. This second one is fundamentally important. It's probably the most important thing we look at. The idea, product or service provides a solution to a real problem, underline real, and I'll come back to that in a moment, or issue in the market that is verified or verifiable by the market. Now, we get lots and lots of approaches. So we might get 2 or 3 approaches a month. And we have to filter through that because we just don't have the capacity to invest any near that level. And so you tend to get a lot of people coming along with a lot of great ideas. You know, I've just developed the perfect mousetrap. And you know, it's the perfect mousetrap. Nobody's done this before. And it's just going to sell so many mousetraps. And all I need is 0.1% of the world market for mousetraps, and I'm going to be a millionaire overnight. And all you need to do is give me a couple of $100,000 and you can be part of it as well. You know, isn't that exciting for you? And that sort of approach doesn't wash with us at all. It's understandable that people with new ideas and trying to develop a business are very enthusiastic about what their business is. That's great. But we're a little bit like banks. You know, we've got to be a little bit harder nosed in terms of trying to delve down into the opportunity. And so is it a real problem that's being solved, or is it your belief that there's a problem out there that needs to be solved? And that gets back to that verified or verifiable market for what you've got. The perfect mousetrap might look terrific, and in fact I've seen some products or services and things that I think that should really go very well. But unless you've really got hard evidence that there is a need for something in the marketplace, then really it means nothing. And probably your idea doesn't mean a lot without that verifiable information. So what we look for is if you've got customers out there sort of saying, if you get the company to this, or the idea to this point, I will buy 100,000 mousetraps from you. I'll give you an order for that. Now we're interested, okay? Or it may not be quite that good. It may be that they'll say that, you know, if you get to this point, we'll enter into some sort of an agency or distribution agreement with you, or something that gives us some comfort that there is an actual verifiable need for what you're talking about. And it's a very important discipline, I think, in any of these sorts of areas, because if you approach things on the basis about it's all about the market, it's all about how much the market will need what I'm trying to produce. And if you go to the market and you ask them, will you give me an order with this product or service, and the market says no, they'll often give you good feedback as to why they won't give you an order. And you can learn a lot from that process. So we see it as really a very important two-way process for anybody trying to develop a new product or service, that it's all about the market, and from the investor's perspective, it's all about you verifying that it's all about the market. So our investment must be very scalable in the sense that we look for opportunities that can create a 10 times return from our investment. And your response might be, well, 10 times return, that's a pretty good return, isn't it? Wouldn't mind that. This is a really high risk area. So the world statistics, or most places around the world, will indicate that for angel investing, that for every 10 investments you make, probably 5 or 6 of them you'll lose your money or you'll barely get your money back. 2 or 3 you might make a bit of a margin, a small margin on it, and 1 or 2 you will do very well out of it if you do the right things. Now, we established Hunter Angel some 6 or 7 years ago, and on paper we've got one that we are very likely to lose our money. There's a total of about 8 direct investments and about 2 or 3 indirect investments we've made, so we're around about that 10 number at the moment. I would say, well, first of all, we haven't exited any investments yet, right? So it's all on paper. So it's a fair while. Obviously not all of those investments were invested 6 or 7 years ago, it's all over the years, but we're taking a risk because none of them have exited yet. You know, you've got your money locked up, none of them are listed entities, so the ability to get your money out is problematic. We try to find ways to exit it, but you know, none of it exited yet. 1 or 2 of them just might do a 10 times return. But others, we might lose our money. So that's why people go for a 10 times return. You've really got to hope that one of those big winners come along and you make your money. The other thing that international statistics establish is that companies with a potential for that sort of 10 times return tend to have a no greater risk for investors than something with a 1 or 2 times return. Now, this is a very important principle when you're looking at new opportunities, particularly in the innovation space. You could invest in the local fish and chips store. That might be an okay business. You might return 10%, 20% or something on your money each year. Okay, that's good. But what we're saying is that the risks associated with that business are probably just as high as a business that has a potential to return you 10 times your initial investment. So which one would you like to invest in? And so it's no accident that in this area, a lot of investment is in the IT areas. Because the IT areas tend to be very scalable in a world sense. You know, if you've got a great idea, well, you know, take it to America and, you know, sell it to the big companies or whatever, and you might well get your 10 times or 20 times or 100 times investment. So we like to find opportunities that have a good cash flow, although often they're harder to find in the startup stage. We look for a rigorous, well-researched business plan. Are important. The quality of the founders is fundamental. In other words, who's driving the business? That to us is 50 or 60% of the issue. Often the idea itself doesn't need to be a world beater, but if you've got great people that are driving it, then you'll back that. And we did an investment with a company based in Wollongong. Well, I'll mention the name, it's no problem there. It's Critical Arc. And the technology that they've got behind them is not particularly complicated. All it is an app that you have on your phone. It's focused towards university campuses and other such campuses, that if you run into an emergency problem, safety or health, you press the app and emergency people can know exactly where you are on campus and can mobilise people directly there. Now you think, well, what's complicated about that in today's world? It's not particularly, but those people knew the market and know the market so well. They'd been in it before, they'd been in big IT companies, they knew how to do it. And they impressed us when they came along that they knew how to do it. And they had a world vision about what they were doing. So we thought, yeah, we'll back that. And that company is one of our better successes. You know, they've stitched up many of the campuses around Australia. They've now gone to the UK and stitched up a number of the campuses around there. They've now gone to USA and stitched up a number of the campuses there. And they're now looking at other applications other than just university campuses. So it's a good demonstration that often it's the people that matter rather than necessarily the idea. The market knowledge and focus sort of flows in with that. Ability to move beyond the comfort zone is important in this space, and credibility and industry experience, which is the example I think I just gave with the Critical Arc people. So how are we going for time? Just about
Yep, you've probably got 5 minutes.
5 minutes, okay. So excellent communication skills. So I think it follows that people need to be good at being able to sell the sizzle for what they've got. We look for the angel money being able to be used for productive purposes. So we're not happy if money is used to pay off debt or something that somebody's already developed as part of their process. Willingness to accept advice, mainly because we're not generally interested in being silent investors. We want to add value to our money so that we feel that we can actually assist the business to move forward rather than just provide dollars. So if you don't accept advice, then you'll be just your own person. You'll be out there just doing your own thing, and you're not interested to hear from us. Understanding of the competition is fundamental. So often in the example of the perfect mousetrap, well, people often don't understand what others might be doing in developing the perfect mousetrap. So that's important. High barriers to entry is fundamental. We'd like often to have a bit of intellectual property protection there, a patent or something like that. But if that's not possible, at least a difficulty for the market to be able to get out there and replicate what you're doing. So verification and ownership of intellectual property, I really just mentioned. Capacity for the angels to add value, I think I just mentioned that we look for that as well. An exit opportunity, as I said, we try to get that up front so that we have an opportunity to get our money out. And as a general rule, it's good for the founders as well to have that attitude that, what is the exit? In my view, in any business, whether it's big or small, if you're involved with the business, then you should be looking at what is the exit opportunity for this business. And by doing that, it focuses you on the idea about what adds value to your business. If I can continue to add value to the business, then if somebody comes along one day and offers me an opportunity to buy the business, then they'll pay me a large amount of money if I've had the idea of exiting the business right from the start, because I'll be adding value all the time. And equity investment is, obviously when we look to invest, it's got to be value for money. We've got to feel that we're not paying too much for what we're buying. And it's got to have sizzle. It's got to excite us. If it doesn't excite us, well, why do we bother? So I might just, I've got another slide just on some legal considerations, but I think in the...
you've probably got a couple more minutes.
Couple of minutes.
Yeah.
So I didn't want to spend a lot of time on that in any event, but just in looking at these areas, some legal considerations. Get the structure right, make sure that before you go out to really get any debt or equity, you should make sure your structures are right within your company. Document key legal relationships that you might have. So if you've got a distribution arrangement, spend a bit of effort to get a good distributor agreement, for example. Shareholder agreements amongst the shareholders are usually pretty important. Convertible notes are being used often at the moment. Now, convertible notes, for those that are not aware, are effectively a loan provided by, say, the angel investor, which can be converted into equity at certain stages and on certain conditions. And part of the advantages of convertible notes for angel investors is that often when we put money in, it's hard to determine what the true value of the company is. And when further fundraising happens down the track, and let's say shares at that stage are worth $2 each, we might have paid $4 a share in the early stages, and so we may have paid too much for our shares, whereas under a convertible note, usually the first investors get a discount off the next round. So we might say we might put in $100,000 into your opportunity as a loan that converts to equity at a 20% discount off the value of the next capital raising. So that way we feel that we've covered our risk associated with being first investors, and we get something out of it. Employee equity plans have become popular again as a result of recent tax changes, so keep those in mind as an opportunity. Intellectual property, look at that as I mentioned before. Get some good advisors, whether they're legal, accounting, financiers, whatever it might be, are very important. In the early stage businesses, then controlling costs is absolutely fundamental. So we like at Angel Investing to look at people that are really hard-nosed about how to control costs. And as I mentioned before, keep the end or exit in mind in anything that you do in the legal considerations. So I might leave it at that, unless anybody's got any questions at this stage or comments. Thanks very much.
Been asked to talk about debt and business. Look, it's a fairly dry subject, so I will do my best to make it a little bit more lively. You're going to drive that thing for me, are you, mate? Oh, you're a good lad. So, interactive, please. My natural style is not stand and talk. Who's had a loan declined on them here? Someone's politely but nonetheless said, sorry, can't help you out. No, you've all got money? Excellent, I'm out of here. So you understand debt then? Who's gone for a loan? Okay, that's a little bit better. Our hands, by the way, unless your armpit's really smelly, our hands, by the way, can get higher. So the reality of it is you've all gone, you found yourself either on an internet talking, putting in information and waiting for this magic response that says, yep, you're a good risk. Or you've sat in front of someone who's got oodles and oodles of paper and poking you and probing you for questions everywhere, and then eventually you either there in the spot get told, yep, we can help you out, or comes back to you at some point later. When you're dealing with businesses, whether it's large businesses or a small business, we heard about the fish and chip shop. They have debt. They're fryers, they usually lease. Their working capital overdrafts, etc., albeit very small, the reality is they have debt. We have people here, we've got someone here from the port, haven't we? Oh, there we go. So that's the other end of the spectrum. So the reality is what I'm going to walk through is fundamentally appropriate whether you're a fish and chip shop or you're an extremely large corporate. Some debt in a business is sensible. I don't know how many times we meet people who are in businesses and we're trying to have no debt in our business. And that's good and it's safe, and as you heard from Grant, from a risk perspective, you've certainly reduced it, but you also held your business back. Because at the end of the day, to try and grow any business purely from an equity position, A, is difficult, B, it's very slow. And your competitors who do take on debt will have the ability to achieve scalability much more quickly. Yes, they'll expose themselves to a bit of risk, but if at the end of the day the risk is managed well and the results and performance comes through, then they will leapfrog any business who is trying to do this on a low to zero debt basis. So debt is sensible. Now the second dot point speaks for itself, particularly in this part of the regime. If you look at the mining sectors and all that, who's here in the mining resource game? Just so I don't tread on toes and things like that. Okay, I come from a family of coal miners, so it's not. A lot of debt can be dangerous. So as soon as a business starts to struggle, what do the owners of a business usually start thinking about? Need more money. Who do they go and see? Neighbour? No. They usually come into our door. They don't even start with Grant's people first. They'll come straight into us and they'll want money. And depending upon what we'll work through a little bit later, we could be inclined, and therefore I become everyone's friend. We may, and Tim's been in this situation, say, look, we're just not able to help you. And so we're not everyone's friend. A lot of debt can be dangerous. So if things start turning south, the immediate mentality of people in business is to grab more debt, because they've got, one thing they do have is absolute confidence they can turn this around. Absolute confidence, and therefore the debt is a short-term risk. Yep, it's a problem, but we're going to turn this around and we'll pay back that extra debt and we'll get ourselves back to where we were. That is the mentality. And sometimes we'll bankroll that mentality because we can see it. But other times it takes longer, it doesn't quite happen the way it should happen, and as a result the debt starts to compound, and then the conversations get a bit more rigorous, and suddenly there's too much debt. Overgeared is the phrase you'll probably hear in the business. Shoot her on, mate. If you remember one thing from today, and only one thing, it's this equation, which most business people take a lot of time and experience and pain to learn. Sales growth, particularly great sales growth, which has us all clinking champagne at home with our friends, etc., does not necessarily mean great profits. Does not then translate into great cash flow, and therefore does not mean the business is becoming more successful, stronger, able to stand on its own 2 feet, weather a few knocks, etc. I honestly cannot say how many times, even right now, there's an echo in here, we won't do that again. Right now we have people who come to us who are so wrapped up in the sales growth. We've won this new contract with Leighton's. You know, they're doing the freeway extension from Kempsey to Coffs, and they need this, and they're subbing out, and I've won this piece, and it's brilliant. Oh, it's great. How much are you making out of it? Oh, you know, they're a big corporate. They screw you hard, a bit like Woolworths and Coles, and suddenly the margins come down. And so the profit's not there, but the labour's geared up. And then, well, what do you need to do this contract? Well, I've got to get this gear. I'm going to have to probably order in a bit more gravel. I need some special sand. That's going to cost me blah, 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 blah. And suddenly the cash flow is now being negatively impacted in order to gear up for this great contract of sales that we've won. And then a little bit later down the track, suddenly it's not happening. There's problems. There's rain. You know, if you're involved in civil contract work, rain suddenly, you know, all the gear's not being run today, but you've still got to pay people unless they're on subbies. Leighton's themselves might have signed a contract on 30-day terms. How confident are you you're going to get your money on the 30th day as opposed to the 75th after 10 phone calls? Things like that. So increased sales does not necessarily, which brings euphoria, does not necessarily translate into success for your business. It is such a critical lesson. You need sales, so don't try and convert this equation, oh, no sales, we're going to be successful. I haven't seen one of those, but the reality is somewhere in between is what you need to understand the tipping point. Next one, champ. So what does this all relate to? And I gave you the quick example that just popped in my head. It's all about the interaction of your cash sources. You know, Grant spoke about one source, you know, equity, money in, investor money in. It's not a common source. And certainly in today's world, the crowdfunding and all these other great peer-to-peer phrases we hear, the reality of it is at the end of the day, who would like to hazard a guess to the business community of the Australian economy, what percentage is funded by the 4 major banks? 90%. Lower? 80. Higher? Now we've narrowed it down, so we should wrap this up pretty quickly. Okay, 84% of every dollar used to fund the Australian economy, whether it's government borrowing, etc., has come out of the 4 major banks or a subsidiary of the 4 major banks, or is raised by the 4 major banks offshore on behalf of things such as government bonds, etc. It is the bulk. You know, when people want to, you know, I went through a period there where I'd go to a barbecue and they say, what do you do for a living? And I say, I'm a cop. They leave you alone. Because I knew if I told them I worked for a bank, whether it was CBA or the NAB, for the next half hour I'd hear about someone in the world that's had a problem with a bank, not necessarily the NAB either for that matter, but that didn't matter. I was a banker and therefore I was a big nasty person. We are the grease in the axle. Think of it like that. Debt funding is the grease in the axle. Everything moves. You don't really see it. It's not nice on your fingers. As soon as it's not there though, you can suddenly realise we've got a problem. So I'm being a little bit flippant, but I'm being very sincere. If you think of it in this context, debt will not scare you. and you'll keep an eye out for it. So cash source, asset conversion to cash. It's all well and good to manufacture a whole lot of things. This is why the IT world is so attractive, if you like, to equity investors. There's virtually no stock. They're not making anything. The reality of it is they're enabling, they're facilitating, they're moving information around, they're allowing us to lead our lives differently, absolutely. But are they tying up money? And the answer is generally no. Whereas traditional businesses, where we all predominantly in this room would come from, asset conversion is absolutely critical. We trained people like Tim, and where's Ollie? Ollie's another one of my people. There's Ollie. And they're not all male, by the way. Over a third of my managers are ladies. They just, unfortunately, have two of my males here, that's all. But the reality of it is we train them to always go to the customer's place, don't bring them in. Why? We like to look. You do. Always see if you can get a tour of the place. Why? You're wandering around the racks and the shelves, you're looking at the pallets. It would not be the first time I've walked through the back area of the business and looked at the layer of dust on the pallets that high. I've already got a feeling that the stock turn is a problem and we're making too much stock, but we're not pushing it out the door. But physically seeing it, there is no better lesson. So asset conversion is critical. The cash cycle, so let's use that Leighton's example. 30-day terms. Who's paying the wages for the first 30 days on a particular month for a piece of work commenced on the 1st of July, for example? The company is. And then on the 30th of July, hallelujah, there's a direct debit into our working account, or a cheque in the old days flows in, and suddenly my cash cycle is 30 days. What happens, particularly if you're dealing, is there anyone from Woolworths or Coles here? I keep using them a bit, and probably only because they are notorious, so that's great, I can go to town on them pair. So the reality of it is you'll sign a contract to provide lettuce to Woolworths, and you think this is brilliant. Margins are fine, because it's all predicated on such huge volumes and blah, 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 blah. And they will enter into a 30-day payment term with you. I can guarantee you will never see your money inside 60 to 75 days. Even if your business is on its knees and people like Tim are knocking on the door saying, I'm sorry, if we don't get this sorted out, we're going to have to pull the rug. They're not interested. You're not from Woolworths or Coles, are you? You weren't in the room a minute ago, that was all.
Sorry?
You don't work for Woolworths or Coles there?
No.
Great. Excellent, excellent. So your cash cycle is what you have to fund. In that instance, say it's 60 days, you're now funding 60 days of your business from your sources. Whether it's retained earnings, it's from previous profit margins. In many cases, and they're in front of us, can we have an increase in our overdraft for the next 60 days from $100,000 to $150,000? Money's a bit tight, it's coming, blah, blah, blah. All these sorts of conversations that Ollie and Tim are involved in every single day is a result of the cash cycle. And then the final one is repeatability. Very much so with business services, consultants, accountants, lawyers, won this huge contract. We've got a customer buying 10 warehouses from Brisbane to Melbourne, and we've got to get it all organised, we've got to get valuations organised, we've got to get titles cleared of caveats, all the sorts of things that lawyers love doing because they can write thousands of letters and show the work and then bill. I can see you smile, you must be a lawyer, mate, the way you're really... But the reality of it is once that's all done and you've made your $500,000 or more out of this particular project, if the repeatability is not there, and I know Steve Main and the team here at PK very well, if the repeatability is not there, then yes, you've made a great windfall and probably made very good money out of an event, but you don't have a business. So the interaction of these four is usually what dictates when a business is going very strong and looking good and achieving scalability and growing and can now launch out and buy more equipment or buy that, you know, buy the factory over in Carrington to allow further expansion versus when they're in front of us, if you like, and it's something. Somewhere in this here is where we've got to start trying to work out, where is this going off the rails? Why is the picture not what we thought the picture was going to be? Next one, mate. So when you provide debt, I try to impart to my people, always ask yourself the question, is this making sense? This is their business, this is the people, this is their history, this is what they embarked to do. We're now further down the road. They're in front of us for a very good reason and therefore it's all making good sense. Or they're in front of us because something's gone off the rail and we're now listening to their version, because it's their business, you know, of why isn't this quite happening? And so we listen. And you ask yourself the question, what am I hearing? Is this making sense? And then you hear the purpose. So if I give you the money, what are you going to do with it? And you listen to that. And help me understand how that is going to rectify the situation that's brought you in front of us. All the time, whoever's sitting on, if they're doing it properly, is really asking themselves, is this all making sense? No different to Grantsville. They will pour over investment opportunities from an equity perspective. All the way along, they're asking themselves this question, does this make sense? I did it, didn't I? I shouldn't have. Does this make sense to pour money into this? Put money into this? So it's not a bad lesson, really. If you remember the other one and that one, you've probably got us all you're going to get out of this. Then you ask yourself the question, would you put your money on the table? You know, Tim lends someone $12 million. It's not coming out of Tim's pocket, but it is coming out of Tim's shareholders' pocket. So in essence, we are charged with the responsibility of lending our money, which is our shareholders' money. Now in business, it's a little bit even closer to home. More often than not, you actually know whose pocket it's coming out of, yours or to the person 3 doors down the corridor or something like that. And so the reality of it is this is the question you've got to ask yourself. Would you put your money to the story you've just heard? Next one, mate. I'll speed it. So whether you're providing 100 grand or 100 mil, the fundamentals are the same, and they are. We call it, there are various, you know, some call it 3 C's. I've heard as many as 5. I like 4. It's a bad number for Asian people, but 4 is actually a good number. Capacity, primary exit, whatever I lend you money for, I'm saying to myself that the money generated by this business, put 100 in, it's going to make 150. That 50 is going to pay debt. It's also going to cover other things, etc., and leave some more in the till to allow it to grow. Primary exit of any financier is the cash that will be generated from the activity that you lend them the money for. It's not security. It is amazing, even as recent as this morning, the people that want to ring me up and get stuck into me because we're going to give you another building, Steve, but you still won't say yes. And that's because I won't do it, they're conducting the discussion around the second dot point, which is collateral. That's security. Now I want security. What do you reckon I want security for? Psychologically, why am I taking security? Anyway.
So there's a risk for them that they're going to lose something if it doesn't work out after this implementation?
Yeah. I'm probably getting even more simpler. Why would I, and thank you for answering, why would I sit there and it's all making sense and it's ticking boxes everywhere, still conduct a discussion? I'd like you to put your home in.
Something goes wrong.
Yeah, secondary exit, you're right. It's where I go if it all goes pear-shaped and there's no money being generated. What happens to a business's cash flow when it starts to fail? So what's my ability with primary exit? So I go to the second, but there's a really important psychological reason why I want security. Ollie, why do I want security?
Because they'll crawl over broken glass before they've got their house.
Skin in the game.
Yep.
Nothing worse than the owner of a business going home every night and lying down the pillow and the wife says, how are we going? Well, we're not doing too good. What, I'm going to lose my home? Yeah, skin in the game. That is why a financier, more often than not, wants security. Because if I have doubts about the first one, I shouldn't be giving you the money. If what I'm giving you the money for isn't going to, generate an activity that's going to produce more money, the basic economics of business, if I'm not convinced of that, I shouldn't give you the money. If I don't think I can get it back from a primary exit, and there are many lenders, we call them second-tier banks, and I will name them, Suncorp, Bankwest, your smaller banks, they are more focused on the collateral, and they reduce the LVRs. You give them an asset for 2 mil, I'll give you $1 million in debt. I know I've got $1 million in buffer roughly if I have to take this asset and put it back out into the marketplace. That is what's called a security lender, and they're out there. The further you go down into the financial tiers, the more they're security orientated as opposed to cash generation orientated. And it's wrong, but there's very little I can do about that. Character. This is an interesting one. We don't bank colourful racing identities, or we don't try to. Sometimes they aren't obvious as colourful racing identities, and then suddenly I've realised I've got, Al Capone's third cousin or something banking with me, and we're going to have to do something about it. The reality of it is do we know? Have they done it before? Property developers are a classic. If they've got a history of building, I'm a diabetic by the way, that's why this thing's buzzing away, so it's not that I'm bored. The reality of it is have they done it before? Have they built 12 townhouses before? Is this their 6th time at it and the other 5 have gone fine and now they want more money to have another go? Great. Good story. Do we know? Well, you've banked with ANZ for 15 years, you've never really entertained us, never returned any of my people's phone calls. Suddenly you're in front of me saying you've got this new great project and you'd like to give the NAB a bit of a crack. My antenna's buzzing. There is a reason why they're having a chat with us and not going back to their banker of such a long time. Now there might be a very valid reason. That bank has had a change of manager and a new person they're not gelling with. So these things don't necessarily mean it's all bad, but they are signals to explore and ask questions. If you are not inquisitive in our role, you will fail. Because the only way you get the answers to all these things is thinking about them and asking the questions. So character has many, many elements to it. The 4 major banks are not allowed to, this will surprise you, but it's a good little anecdote. We are not, as I know the other 3 are allowed to lend money to brothels. Why? It's a legitimate business, they're legal. Provide a great service to the community, we won't start that debate. But the reality of it is it's the 2nd oldest profession in the world. The reality of it is social responsibility and branding are then associated for where your money is. So there's a whole range of dimensions under the heading of character. And conditions. Conditions is market conditions. If you walked in today and said to me, I'm going to start up a new transport business targeting the mining industry in the Upper Hunter because I reckon I could win a couple of contracts of transport and coal and that for them, I'd probably sit there and say, champ, I think you've missed it. However, same industry came to me and said, look, I've got some really great mechanics. We've all just come back from South Africa or America where we were overhauling and repairing and reconditioning Westrac or Caterpillar equipment. And we know that the mines aren't buying new gear. You've just got to go out here to Tomago and look at how much yellow goods are sitting in the car park. But we also know that the breakdown and the amount of money they're trying to squeeze into repairs and maintenance is a good opening for us. Now that makes sense in today's environment. Conditions. Understand the market conditions, understand the economy, understand in certain environments some businesses will flourish and others will struggle, and then the conditions will change, and then those that were struggling will possibly flourish, and those that were doing great, aka the mining game 5-6 years ago, will suddenly find themselves doing it hard. I only reference mining because we all know it and we're living in amongst it all. Next one. So, rather than just prattle on and bore you about war stories and everything else, talking with Tim, the essence is how you use your brain. It's not how good you can punch a financial calculator. So we prepared, jointly with Grant, 4 scenarios that you're actually going to go away and have a bit of a chat about. This isn't about coming back and telling me that the current asset ratio is this and blah, blah, blah. I don't even know what a current asset ratio is. I don't care. What I want to hear is the logic and the intelligence brought to the table and understanding what it is that's going on. I was being sincere there. So the first case study, there are 4 different ones. I understand you'll be broken into 4. Is this what I'm supposed to be doing, or am I stealing your thunder? Yeah? I'm on a roll, eh? So the first one's a startup. I won't read it. We can all understand English. It's fairly straightforward. Someone's got a great idea, so it's more orientated towards Grant's world. We're not great on startups in banks. We do them, so it's not that bad. But particularly with IT startups, no assets, nothing there, long lead times, a lot of things happening up there, cloud. Can you imagine the person that went to the bank for the very first time saying, I've got this cloud concept, and I reckon I could get everyone to put their data up in that cloud and be able to pull it down and access it and keep it to date and share it, but I reckon it's going to take me 2 years, a team of about 100 people, and I need about, I'm making this up, say I need 5 mil to get it all off the ground. How about you guys lend me the money? And I'll put my $400,000 house up. How's that? You reckon that got off the ground inside the bank? No. But it's happened. And that's where people like Grant come into play. So the first one is a startup. The second one is another business in early stage. So this comes back to that equation. They're growing, they're doing great, but all the other elements of the business, profitability, cash flow, we call it success. Success to me is the sustainability and viability. Is your business getting stronger? So that's what the second one is about. The third one, probably a bit more now our world, it's a mature business that's struggling, has some great ideas but needs the bank to keep rolling with them. And then the fourth one again is an established business, but it's actually growing very strongly, and on the surface would appear, this is a laid down misère, but if you actually peel into it a bit, it might not be quite so laid down, except maybe to put a reef on it. So there are the 4 case studies. How do you want to run it from here, champion?
Well, I was thinking you split up into 4 groups. I've got copies of the case studies, break up for 15 minutes, have a chat about it, come back and maybe a couple of minutes each just to tell
This is not about the depth of your analysis. This is about your intelligence of understanding business and the fundamentals of business and the things you would explore. The sort of conversations I would have with Tim or Ollie or their leaders would have with them in terms of, this customer, they've got a file in their hand, can we have a chat about it? We don't get into all the file. I want to hear what's going on with the fundamentals of this business.
Also, Steve and I are available to wander around to the groups and just, if you want to ask questions, or we might ask a few hard questions of the group as well to help focus the thinking a little.
Is there any questions just at a higher level on what I've spoken about at this point? Yeah.
What sort of percentage the people that approach you, where would you just say there's something wrong here?
Well, there's 2 elements to that. There's your existing customers, where we are meant to have a degree of proprietary knowledge of what's going on. This comment might surprise, but not everybody wants to share with me, even when they're an existing customer, what's going on. So it's like extracting teeth sometimes. I've actually had customers, I will, very quick war story. Sitting in front of this family, they own 6 pubs scattered around northern New South Wales, and they owed us about $21 million, and I'm just trying to renew the facilities and get information. And I had the head of the family say to me, Steve, you're just too pokey with your questions, mate. And I turned around and said, well, I've got 21 million reasons why I'm so pokey and trying to understand what's going on. But I'm sitting in front of 5 members all with the same DNA, so that never helps, of this family, basically trying to get me out the door as quickly as possible, having told me as little as they want to tell me, but at the same time, I'm going to keep rolling $21 million and give them more. Steve, we found another pub. Would the bank give us $4 million? Well, that'll depend on the pub. The cat, no, you missed the question, Steve. If we found another pub, will you give me $4 million? No, you're not listening to me in response. Now, that's not an unusual conversation, believe it or not. Not everyone likes us. Not everyone likes sharing their information. But the reality is, the more, and I will say this, the more you work with a bank and be honest and open with them, it doesn't matter which bank now, you should generally find that they will return that in kind. It's when I'm dealing with the colourful racing identities or the secret squirrels, or the people that tell me, you don't need to know that. I don't know how many times I've heard that in my life. That's when I start to bring the shutters down a little bit and my tone of voice changes as well. It's actually quite an interesting job what we do. Anyway, let's not digress.
Alright, so Angel is a capital overhaul services.
Yep.
Suffered in the downturn and now
So this is a business that's around, it's lived, it's grown, it's enjoyed times, but we're struggling, and they've come to us with a great way that they're going to save their business. So would you put your money on the table? That's the answer at the end of the day that you're trying. Sorry, that's the question you're driving to through all your line of questioning. Do you have faith?
So we think the risk is huge. It's a big risk to the bank.
No risk to you. You are the bank in this exercise.
Well, I'm not going in, so it's no risk to me. The Bank of Smith is out. I think that's sort of what I'm saying.
So what's one question I did say to you? You should always ask, does it
Makes sense.
Right. So what you're listening to from them, does it make sense? Yeah, we know it's gone south. We know the coal industry's gone bad. But we've got this plan. From that point, you're asking yourself, what am I listening to? Does it make sense? Would I bankroll that? Would I throw money at that? You're really trying to understand that their plans to save their business and turn it around is, if it makes sense, and I know you and I've bankrolled you to this point, I may go forward. I might not go forward with as much money. I might make this a little harder. I might get you reporting and telling me a little bit more frequently and what sort of things that we're going to keep a real close eye on. And it's not a lot of things. It might only be 2 or 3 things. It might be margins. It might be stock turn. At the end of the day, it'll always be about sales growth and margins. Sales might be there, but the margins aren't. I'm still not excited. Sales are coming off. Well, that's not necessarily a bad thing if it's translating to an improvement in margins and the cash overall. So the EBIT, the earnings before interest and tax, is growing. Okay, that makes sense. We'll throw something at that. So you've got to ask yourself, what are the questions, what are the things you're going to go and try and peel the onion on to these people? Is this helping?
So I think we kind of
Go
go
ahead.
where there's not enough information in what we've got here.
Oh, it never is.
About giving them money.
There never is.
Go and ask them.
If there was enough information, I don't need Tim and Ollie. I just go and get a computer and feed it in and say, what am I doing? There never is. You will all, every answer to a question generates another question. At some point, you've got to stop asking questions and make a call.
I mean, I think at face value, I think the new opportunity looks
Yeah, I mean, the
reasonably logical.
The reduction in the resilience to the resource section makes sense.
Yeah. So we understand what's
Or
happened
the
to
aim to reduce its reliance, sorry, not resilience.
So not everyone that's been caught up in the downturn has actually survived and still here today. Some are. Because they've managed to diversify away from resource sectors. I haven't read this. I think I wrote this the other day for Tim. Anyway, just let me suspend this. Otherwise.
If they did actually win it, if that was the condition,
So what are we doing?
you win the project and we
Sorry.
throw the cash in.
Business embark diversification. Well, that's a good thing. To reduce its reliance on resource. Excellent. That gets a tick. You're the financier. You've been approached to continue helping them through their existing facilities. So we've already given them the money. The question is, do we just keep it out there or do we reach a point and say, I want it back? I'm sorry, it's just, I'm putting good money after bad. I want it back. That's the sort of question.
So you didn't really have much of a business plan or market research, so we wanted to understand a little bit more around how we might go about those things, and to know a little bit more about why he wants to employ someone in sales for 12 months before he's completed the idea and have any support for Yeah, the viability of it. Oh, sorry, yeah, so considering it's a software application, do you need a sales person to actually sell it where it can be interactive on the internet itself? So that's it.
So do you think this is more my world or Grant's world?
I wasn't here, so I don't know.
So we discussed it.
You're not on your own, by the way. That's a good point. Your whole team should be supporting you.
Yeah.
It's not a combination, guys, in terms of both of your worlds.
So you want debt and equity.
Well, if he's got the only material asset, he's got the
Sorry.
IP rights. We discussed them.
So do you think I'd get more excited by that, or do you think Grant would get more excited?
Get excited.
I'll excite Grant.
So the IP.
Yeah.
That's
I don't understand so much about software, but this IP thing, he's got it. That's his, he owns it. And he's got a couple of people, and it's good. And it's a couple of people that are endorsing that. So
Yeah.
further to what you said, we thought, okay, who are these people? Let's
Yeah,
get them
one
to
might
write.
be huge contact in the Yamaha pianos thinks it's a great idea.
So if they were
That's
right,
pretty good.
okay, we'll invest this amount of money if you get to that 20% to complete it 100%.
Yeah.
Okay, so that may or may not excite the people in your realms. The 200,000 that he needs probably won't be that amount, but in terms of business planning and that, then I believe that.
So what are the areas might you explore? Let's say it was Grant's proposal, because at the end of the day, he's the one who's in essence got to go and sell this to the investors to provide the equity. So pretend he's the customer at the moment. We all have customers. What are the areas you might explore with him on this particular thing?
So it's, at the moment, it's an application for.
And don't leave him on his own, the rest of the team, by the way. I'm sure he wants you to help.
But it's not only that, the IP address can be used for any different instrument, really. It doesn't just
Yeah, good.
need
No,
to be
that's
for
good.
pianos.
I like your thinking.
It can be for, you know, what's the electronic instruments as well.
Yeah, good.
Electronic, so,
Yep.
you know, it doesn't have to be the Foo Fighters, it can be the, you know, Gaga, Lady Gaga and all that stuff as well.
So that's the sort of sizzle we talk about. You know, it's sort of thinking a little bit outside the square and thinking, well, actually, there's a number of ways that this could be done. Yep.
Which I guess, yeah, the backup security of the piano.
You're right, mate.
Could I, is there any further comments on that case study at this stage? Anybody else in any of the other groups got any comments on that?
You also look at committing debt funding or something like that. It's very hard to actually quantify what the probability of what the value might be as well. So
Yes.
you sit there and you go, this might be a fantastic idea, but its potential only, it gets limited to a couple $1 million, in which case, what's its value? If he wants to borrow $200,000, whereas if you go into the equity funding, you can say, look, we're willing to put this in, but it's going to be related to how successful you are. If it's a 20%, 30% ownership associated with it, that's much better for you as an investor because it's got more potential if you can see that potential associated.
Actually, that's also a very good point, because often we'll invest in tranches, in stages, and you know, we might put in, he might be seeking $200,000 from us, but we might say, well, we'll give you $50,000 to get you to this stage, and if you achieve that, we'll give you another $50,000, and do it in drips like that. And it may actually be an escalating value of the share, the entry price as you go up, because it's de-risking. Every time you reach a stage, it's de-risked for the investors, and so you can afford to pay a little bit more for the shares as you go along.
So this guy didn't have much of market research or a business plan, so that's the sort of the money we thought less than $200,000 that wouldn't be spent on a salesperson, but would be put towards further progressing the idea and its development, but also looking at the market research in particular,
Yeah.
perhaps a business plan, and then that would give him more ammo to have a bit of equity
Yeah.
discussion.
Okay.
I was just going to, it's possible to pull Grant's presentation back
Yeah,
up,
that's a good
because,
thing if you could do it.
is there a real
Time, I've probably got 10 minutes to wrap it all up.
okay, is there a real problem, or is there just a great idea?
It's
Just your opinion. There's no right or wrong answer, by the way. It's just, you know, we've all got a brain, I think. Great idea. Is there a real problem? Customers want problem solved. You don't sell something unless you're solving a problem, believe it or not. That problem, by the way, could be just, wow, I'd love to go to Hawaii. So now I'm a travel agent, solving a problem. But the reality is there's got to be a problem or customers don't, you've got to fulfill them.
That's the market research.
So you probably need to know that first. So you might not want to give me the money yet.
Yeah, well, I was going to mention that. In fact, I might just mention what my response would be as an angel investor to this. The first thing is that it starts right at the start. Paul is 80% through the process of developing a new software application. That's what everybody says. The reality is they're probably 50% of, and a lot of founders, they love to tinker, right? They love to spend their time inventing, but they're not necessarily good at business. So, you know, they'll be developing this software for the next 20 years unless it's really focused on the process of converting something into making money. So part of our process is to know when to sort of say, stop developing and just get out there and start selling it. You know, you can worry about Mark II and Mark III down the track, and by then you've established a market and people will want your stuff and they'll want to see Mark II and Mark III. So get on with it and be a bit sceptical about 80% because they're probably 50%. They're not investor ready at the moment from our perspective. They don't seem to really have a strategy or a business plan, and they need to really...
So are they bank ready? What do you reckon the bank's going to ask for? I want a business plan. Yeah. What am I actually lending you money to do? And how is that creating more money for you to repay me?
Yeah. Yep. The business is potentially scalable. I like the idea of applying it to other applications, and so that's a positive thing.
Okay, so you, Paul, sorry mate.
Yep.
Investors said no, the bank said no. Where do you go?
Yeah.
And back to is the people that think it's a good idea, if they might throw some money in it.
So out of Grant or myself, who has he got more chance of engaging with at this point? But he's got work to do.
What we'd tell them to do is to go off to... We know people that can help develop business plans and things. And we'd say, look, you know, if you can get this right and think through a little bit, we might talk to you in 6 months' time. So go away and do it. Somebody picked up the issue about, you know, employing a salesperson, which is an obvious issue with this one. They're probably not thinking laterally enough about how to grow the business. It may well be that a salesperson is not appropriate. You know, it may be that there are other ways of being able to develop this business than just employ somebody and go around and knock on the door of piano tuners. So it requires at this stage a lot of lateral thinking about how you grow this business, and getting a lot of advice from a lot of different people about thoughts about how you might do that.
The ultimate question, we'll move on. You're controlling time, by the
I
way.
think we're going to move on.
Okay.
Ultimate question, would you put your money on the table to Paul at the moment?
Case study 2.
See how easy it is to say no when you're going to hand money
Let's
out?
try and do it in 5 minutes each.
Just wondering whether we should role play or should
No,
just talk what we
We've got to go
talked
quick.
about. Okay, I'll go quick. So Jane has operated an online business for 2 years selling to Asia clean and green products. She wants to expand outside of, she's currently uses at home and it's not really working out for her because her business is growing really fast. She got $150,000 into the business at the beginning to get stock, and she's making mass sales, $200,000 a month, but her cash is reducing by $2,000 a month, which we have lots of questions about. And she's also got quite big overheads. The business though has strong supplier arrangements and is well known and has a really professional website for her market. And she wants $1 million so she can set up a new warehouse in Shanghai and get more stock. Basically, we have a few questions for Jane. Why is she getting this $2,000 cash burn? Is stock levels increasing and people owe her money? Is she directly selling to the market? or has she got kind of a middleman that's holding on a bit late with their payments or something like that? Will the overhead also?
So again, there's a team behind this young lady, so I just don't. I'd like others.
You said too there's a big cash burn there, so is she paying herself a whole lot of money per month? Has she got a bank account? She paying herself $100,000 a month?
So would you ring Tim at the bank for this $1 million, or would you ring Grant to take this business to its next point? You probably ring both, but where do you think you'll have a better hearing?
I think the bank. The bank.
Yeah.
Tim?
I'd probably still, as the bank, I'd probably still say, what do you got for security?
It's a bit early for the bank yet. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, maybe a mix at this early stage.
Can I
Great.
argue a bit there too, because I looked at it and went, well, if they're looking at a warehouse, they're fitting things out, they're buying some equipment. I agree, I thought it was mostly an equity conversation, but there might be some avenues there for debt, depending on how rigorous the business plan is, and how good the long-term vision, and then the projections, and who's going to do what, where, and how this thing's actually going to work under sales, finance, operations, HR. And if it was really, really rigorous, that might be something we'd look at for some secure parts of it.
I think maybe like something in the middle, like a silent business partner or something like that could be good. Someone that's willing to invest that kind of money and reap the benefits and be there kind of long term as well. Because she's upscaling the business.
So,
There's some evidence there though that suggests sales are, she's got good sales, the sales are increasing, she knows what the gross margins are good, so definitely got all the sense. If you do a projection, you'd be able to project months and months in advance exactly what the revenue's going to be moving forward, so there is a possible sell to an investor as well.
so that's all really good stuff. I think there are two fundamental things about this business. One is the cash burn, which everybody worries about, and as was asked, why is that happening? But the second thing is the growth, and I also, in the case study, there's also like the gross margin talked about there, about 50%. Now it says 10% growth margin a month. Now that's a sizzling business, right? And so I would actually be strongly interested in investing in this business as an equity investor, because this is like, you know that if you can get a few fundamental things right with this business, if that continues to grow, this is going to be a great business. And if you can capitalise it right, so I'd be I think in my view, the first stage is equity investment. It might be somebody, a trade investor, or probably not an angel investor, because there's no real innovation or whatever, but we may be interested. But then I'd be knocking on Steve and Tim's door pretty quickly. After that, once you get your house in order and your cash burn in order, probably initially to finance individual aspects about it, and then if they're interested, that is, and go from there. And then after a while, it'll be probably all debt financed.
So in simple language, an investor goes in, gets it a little bit further. Investors are people, they don't want to be exposed to risk all the time. That's what banks are for. So they then start to blend the bank in to offload the risk. And eventually the investor's risk gets less and less, and it's just purely then the business's operations risk of making money, and it's the bank that's carrying the entire risk. That's a standard sort of path, if you like.
Okay, thank you.
Cool.
Number 2, team 3.
Okay, so ours is very relevant to the Hunter. It's a business, a labour hire and mechanical overhaul service business that's just gone through the boom. They've done extremely well. They peaked at $23 million a year turnover. To accommodate their growth, they've gone out, they've bought a nice new big shed, they've stocked up on supplies and gear, and then they've hit the downturn. So at the moment they've managed to scramble a little bit, lay off some staff, get rid of some gear, but they're still, what have we got here? They're bringing in $800K a month, but their overheads are still at $1 million a month. So they're in a position, they've made a decision here. They're going to look to reduce their reliance on the resource sector, diversify a bit, but to do that, they need a bit of money. So they've gone back to us as the bank and gone, will you continue to fund us? We've done a little bit of research just in the reading here. They've tendered on a new maintenance contract, which is looks like it'll bring in 3.6 million in revenue, but to do that, to gear up for that contract, they need an investment of another $1 million. So our first question was, what are your possible actions to point one, which is the existing debt? So we're in a bit of a hard spot here. We've sort of seen it in the Hunter at the moment with everyone in this position. Do they diversify? We were sort of suggesting, do we cut our losses now? Do we try and recover where we're at? The company's on a downward spiral, negative 200k a month. We can probably get out of this, and depending on the existing debt, it doesn't say how much we've already invested on top of the negative 200. So we need to ask them some good questions there and do some research about, I don't know, the character of the people, how much they're invested in the company, the quality of their ideas.
Particularly on who the new contract's with, possibility of that extending, or how long that would go for, how reliable the new contract will be.
So given a bank's objective is to keep a business in business, not everyone necessarily believes that, but it is, then what is this, at the moment the business is failing. It's on a slow path of death.
Yeah. So
What could this contract do for them?
Yeah, so this contract
Just brings them above.
Yeah, 100k in the black a month.
Yeah.
It's
So-
100k in a month black, $100 million. $1 million investment's not particularly big, I wouldn't think, for the bank.
But it buys time and it puts the ledger in the black instead of the red. So for a bank's perspective, we believe if we have faith in these people, we try to take the option to buy them time to keep improving it.
Possibly secures the bigger investment the bank's already got in the business.
If we didn't have faith, I'd say, I think you need to go and find an equity partner to try and de-gear a bit. But that would be a challenge as well.
So it certainly wouldn't be attractive to a typical sort of angel investor or whatever. This is sort of like either a dying business or a struggling business. It's just sort of not attractive to this space. There are some that invest in these sort of opportunities, but they're much more limited.
Grant, can I just throw a question out there? Vulture funds are a big deal in the States, where I lived for 10 years. Are there any operating around here? Because this sounds like a vulture fund kind of opportunity in a sense. Is there any of those sort of activities?
No, not that I've ran across myself, or limited.
But you
Yeah.
know what I'm talking about, when they come in and turn it around. And almost
Yeah,
business
the-
and take a lot of equity in
There are people that specialise in it. I know one person in Sydney that's doing a little bit of that. It's hard yakka. You know, one of the big problems with this area is that a business, it's much more certain to invest or to lend in an existing business than in a new emerging business, just because of all the uncertainties associated with it. And so if you've got a core business that's dying, and then you say, okay, this is a fantastic new opportunity. From an investor's perspective, it's really hard to know where that new opportunity is going to go, because you don't have the track record. And so it's all about risk. And I think from I suppose the banker's perspective, it's probably very similar. I mean, you know that it's very uncertain going to develop the new business.
There was something we were a bit on the case study too, just how far out of their core business was this new contract. That's one thing we really
Yes.
know. Is it something they're diversifying, or is it using their existing skill set?
Yeah, which goes back to the risk thing, isn't it? If you know it's in their skill set, and they're good people, then you might back them, either for debt or
Are you going to give them $1
equity.
million to do the contract, or you're going to send them off to your asset management area and start the process of recovery?
I think provided they were, they've been a good customer, like they've showed sort of good performance in the past, I think we back them. They showed a bit of initiative where they managed some of their costs by doing the cost reductions. They went out and got some alternate investment in the business at the same time, on prop them up, so they showed a bit of initiative there.
So you take a punt.
Think so?
You didn't realise all bankers are gamblers, did you? Okay.
Okay, we've got 5 minutes to go, thank you.
Could I just pass one final comment on that one? Sometimes, and the bankers won't like me to say this, but sometimes it's very appropriate just to close up a poor performing business, right?
Oh, absolutely.
You know, sometimes, and possibly the bankers love it because they'll still get their core money back often, if you do it early enough. If you've got this great new opportunity, maybe you need to do that in a new structure. Get rid of your debt, you know, get rid of the lame duck and start afresh with something new.
So 2 words drive that: voluntary administration. Every week I will get an email of one of our customers that's gone into voluntary administration, which is effectively that phenomenon. Sometimes they do it more often than not to avoid the ATO.
Okay, last team.
So we've got a local business that specialises in equipment hire and sales, and then it's recently gone into equipment modifications. So it started with 2 people, it's grown to 100 staff over the 10 years. Early stages they had good cash flow, and then the director saw that there was a market for these modifications, and they grew rapidly. The margins on the modifications are strong, but they're having problems with cash because they have to buy all the add-ons for the modifications. They're carrying large WIP volumes, and they're dealing with a lot larger corporations that are taking longer to pay them. So questions we would ask would be, well, look at their competitors, I suppose, to see what other competitors are in the market, how's their industry going. Not quite sure from this exactly what industry they're hiring and what to and what sort of equipment it is. Have they grown too fast? You know, they've got so many staff, and obviously the costs involved with that while they're not getting paid. So whilst they're making good margins, they've got, you know, high WIP, high staffing costs. Like, what money are they actually bringing in at the end of the day? And then their capacity to keep the business running and obviously repay debt as well, if that's the avenue that if they went down. The debtor process, so how do they manage their debtors? What are their terms for payment? And, you know, is that happening? Who are their customers? Are they foreign? Are they local? How much they actually want, like what sort of finance are they after? An overdraft or a long-term loan, or it doesn't really seem to say.
So what's the danger with this business? Because it all looks great on paper.
Yeah.
But
Well,
what is the danger with this business?
we sort of spoke about is the change that's happened with this going from 2 people to 100 people, and what that actually does to the structure of a company. Is it still operating as a 2-person company but there's 100 of them, or have they actually got an efficient and an effective system that they run their company through now that they've got those 100 people?
It's a very good point. Quite often small businesses that have grown successfully are still being conducted, and MIS and data and cash management and everything still reflects the $100,000 building company as opposed to the $40 million building company, and it's a whole new world. That's a very good point. This business's biggest danger is over-trading, the cash cycle, and this is the equation. Sales are going through the roof, but everything else appears to be going down, and now they're in front of the bank saying, we have such a great story, and the bank says, well, you do, but you don't.
Yeah, it's not clear what they want to borrow the money for. Like, it's not to grow any further, it's just to survive month to month.
That's not uncommon. So what would you do here?
We nominated that it would
So
probably...
you didn't realise Tim and Ollie's job's so hard, did you?
Is it that it was probably more in line with the bank, sort of a debt funding as opposed to equity funding? So
It's definitely a debt solution.
Yeah, I agree.
So there's things like invoice finance. If sales are growing really high and the cash cycle is stretching and putting a lot of strain, a financier can buy the invoices, and we effectively then take a clip, as we always do. And so if it was a $100,000 invoice and we're happy with who's providing the invoice, we would give that business $90,000, pretty much right up front. We will then collect the invoice, which might be another 45 days, and we'll keep the 10 grand differential. But what it does for the businesses growing is it gives them 90 grand straight away to keep funding this growing cash cycle. So invoice finance is absolutely one. Given that they've got equipment, you'd explore equity in the equipment. If it's good equipment with a longer life, you could possibly do a buy and sell back on the lease back, sorry, on the equipment, and that gets more money into the business. What you're trying to do is get money quickly into this business to allow the cash, to allow it to be able to fund itself through the cash cycle. That's your primary objective.
Just on that debtor invoicing, is that sort of percentage, that sort of 10% typical? No.
Well, for you it'd be 15, but you know, perhaps rather.
It's
It's a variable amount.
We actually do a little bit different to the clipping the ticket like that. We will lend against the invoices. So say they've got $1 million debtor book, we'll lend 80% of that. So let's say it's drawn to 500,000 at any one time, we'll lend them 400,000. We'll just lend them an interest rate. So it might be 8%, it's not sort of real super low, but it might be 8%. We just charge an interest rate on the money they use. It's a lot like an overdraft.
Yeah.
Rather than having bricks and mortar security, the security is the debtors.
Our only security is the debtors. So when a business is failing, what's that usually mean about the quality of the debtors? They're not paying and they're not good. So the risk profile is an exponential profile.
Could I just mention a war story about that, which I think I mentioned to these fellas a couple of weeks ago. I was involved in advising a company that was importing products and selling to retailers. And he didn't have much equity, and he went into one of these debtor financing arrangements with a non-banker factoring type agent. And it gets back to Steve's comment before about the quality of the financiers is fundamental to this area. We weren't involved in advising the client at that stage about the facility that they'd entered into, but what appeared to happen is that the financier, we think, deliberately instigated a default by our client because they had all these penalties in the finance agreement that if you default, then you pay these penalties. And so he had all these, all the money, the financier had all the security of the debts that are payable. And so they saw it as a cash opportunity to grab all these things and charge the penalties, and that's exactly what they did in our view. The client didn't have any money in the end to litigate it. I was just advising in the process of stepping through the process while the financier actually grabbed their money. And they looked at trying to litigate it later on, and I think there might have been some grounds for it. But the lesson on that one is that there are sharks out there that will, you know, the fine print on these arrangements will often provide for all sorts of penalties and things. And if you're not dealing with reputable lenders, then you can get hit. And that was an example of how it can happen.
Okay, I'm getting the wind up, guys, so thank you very much. Look, I'd like to extend sincere thank you to Steve and Grant